What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. No sleep, no rest over here. It's playoff time. We're going to get into it. Previewing Game 7, the Cavs are 5-2 in all-time Game 7 matchups. And I don't know I know Chris remembers this, but the last time that the Cavs were in Game 7s, it happened in the same year, 2018, in the first round against the Indiana Pacers, and then in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Boston Celtics. Ironic how things work out, and the team that the Cavs would face in the next round would be the Boston Celtics, and they've shown in past history that they have gotten past the first round after getting to Game 7 and been able to be successful. Wait. Let's stop there. Yes, LeBron James was on this team. So, we have to preface with all of that. But after leading the series 2-0 against the Orlando Magic in 2024, the Cavs find themselves back against the wall. Game 7. The two best words in sports, to quote Donovan Mitchell. And Chris, there's a lot riding on this game, more so than just the game itself. We're talking about roster complications. We're talking about upper management. We're talking about Donovan Mitchell's future. What are you most looking for in this Game 7 matchup for the Cavs?
I think the biggest thing to me, guys, is who meets the moment. That's what it's about. Who's ready for this level of pressure? Who's ready for these expectations? Who's ready for this level of tension? Who's ready for this stage with all eyes on you? It takes a certain kind of player to handle the magnitude of Game 7. It takes a certain kind of coach to handle the magnitude of Game 7. And I'm just going to look at the same thing that I think Donovan Mitchell and other people around this organization are looking at when it comes to an evaluation. A level of readiness across the roster for what Game 7 requires, because it is unlike any other game that any of these players who haven't experienced a Game 7 have been in throughout the course of their career. There is no substitute for the pressure that you feel. There is no substitute for the magnitude of the moment. I wrote for cleveland.com, guys, that legacies are on the line, jobs are on the line. It's hard to overstate what tomorrow means for the Cavs.
And Jimmy, is this your first Game 7 that you're going to be in the arena for?
It is. I'm popping my Game 7 cherry. I'm very excited. I'll be watching nerdy, but like possessions. We're counting possessions tomorrow, right? Because these are two teams to start with that, as we have seen over the course of 6 games, maybe a little offensively challenged at times. Also, 2 great defenses.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That needs to be mentioned as well. 2 great defenses, 2 offenses that have found themselves stuck in the mud quite often in this series. And that doesn't get easier during a Game 7 because the defensive intensity ratchets up. Every possession feels this is that one time where college basketball and then the NBA overlap. This is your single game elimination type situation. So the intensity is ratcheted up. The pressure, every moment feels heavier. The ball might feel a little bit heavier. We're going to, like, to Chris's point, we're going to find out who's built for it and who's not real quick. But these Game 7s tend to be a little bit lower scoring for these reasons, because the defense is a little bit more focused, because the shots are a little bit harder to hold on to. The ball is there's more energy in the ball. There's more force in the building, and there might be a little bit less, whatever you want to call it, weight to the whistle in this game. Like Game 7, I think traditionally, in most cases, caveat, on this stage, you want to let players play. So that means it's the turnover conversations that we've been having about Darius Garland, that much more important. You have to value the basketball in a game like this. Jared Allen's status, massively important because of the rebounding battle, because of, offensive rebounds are hard enough to stomach for a defense trying to get a stop as it is. But when the finish line is as close as it's going to be tomorrow, it's a little bit harder in a game like this. So value the basketball. It's your last chance to hold it.
We've also reached a point here, guys, in this series where these two teams hate each other. These two teams are so irritated playing one another. Darius Garland is irritated by the constant pressure of Jalen Suggs. Donovan Mitchell irritated by the grabbiness of the Magic. And the same goes on the other side. And we've also reached a point in the series where they know each other's plays. They know each other's sets. They can call out ATOs. They can call out sideline out of bounds. There are no secrets now. There are no tactics. There are no real cards to play at this point in the series. Like, sure, there are certain things that Jamal Mosley as a coach is going to try and do, and there's certain things that JB Bickerstaff as a coach will try and do, adjustments, minor adjustments throughout the course of the game. But this is going to come down to execution. This is going to come down to will. This is going to come down to determination. And honestly, like, this might come down to who can make the tough shots more consistently. Because, with these two defenses playing at the level that they've played at throughout the course of this series, and with all of the knowledge accumulated throughout the course of this series, like, can you make a tough shot over a contest? Can you just go create something out of nothing on the offensive end of the floor because your first action is being eliminated by the scouting report? Your second counter to that is being eliminated by the scouting report. So when things break down, and things are going to break down, when the ball gets stagnant, when the offense bogs down, can you just go create something? And that's where Donovan Mitchell comes into play. That's where Darius Garland comes into play. That's where maybe Karis LeVert comes into play. Like, the guys with the capability of that, it may end up being their kind of game. It may end up being them shouldering the offensive responsibility, even to an increased level than what has happened in these first 6 games. Like, great shots are probably going to be hard to come by, especially against these caliber defenses. So you may just have to take the good shot and make sure that you capitalize on those opportunities.
I'm really of the mind that this is where you determine which team is better. Who has the guy that is going to step up? Who has the team that is built for the moment? Like, you're 3-3 in the series. Like, there is no more even you can get. The biggest, let's say, pendulum swinger in Game 7 on Sunday is that the Cavs are playing at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Cavs, if I read the stat right, the Cavs are 81-38 at home all time in the playoffs.
Doesn't matter. That's why they call it history.
Right. So the chance to rewrite history or to continue history in the Cavs case, but also thinking about, like I said, the last time the Cavs were in a Game 7 situation, they had LeBron James. The last time the Cavs won a Game 7 series without LeBron James was in 1992 against the Boston Celtics and in 1976 against the Washington Wizards. It's been some time. It's been a long time since this team has been successful without LeBron James. We can look back at the first time that they've got. This is the opportunity to be the first time to go to the second round without LeBron James since 1993. So my thing is, Chris, you mentioned Donovan Mitchell, Karis LeVert, Darius Garland. I think it's about how these guys are going to be able to play, right? You talk about will. You talk about determination. You talk about want to. That all comes down to how these guys are going to be able to manage the injuries that they're dealing with. And if they are going to be able to shoulder whatever load is given to them. Donovan Mitchell might not be able to go for 50 again tomorrow night. Darius Garland might not be able to get 20, but maybe he can pass the ball and get facilitating and create more offense on that side of the ball. My thing is, how effective is Evan Mobley going to be on his ankle? How is he going to be after Chris mentioned he was limping out of the locker room after game 6? Jared Allen, will he be available? How important those guys are going to be in this series, especially against a team that could be without Gary Harris. So you could see the 4-6-10 lineup again for the Orlando Magic because Gary Harris is questionable for Sunday's game, as well as Jared Allen being questionable for Sunday's game. Obviously, when you look at guys for the Cavaliers, you look at Donovan Mitchell. If there is an importance level for a different player, where are you giving it to Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen? Who do you think needs to step up the most in this game 7? Jimmy, let's start with you.
I mean, it's got to be Darius for a couple of reasons. Number one, he's their second best player at creating something out of nothing, right? He is, he's the kind of guy that the other guy on their team that you can hand the ball in the late clock and say, go do something with it. You know, work your handles, create a shot for yourself or someone else that looks better than what we would be able to get otherwise. But it's also, again, to the bigger picture, like we talked about yesterday. This is can you do this? Like, can you meet the moment? That at this point, that to me can be a question that goes beyond the Donovan Mitchell era. Obviously, first and foremost, the Cavs are trying to put together a playoff run that convinces Donovan Mitchell, even though you didn't handpick us, we are worth consideration for the remainder of your prime, your next long-term contract, which will be the most important long-term contract that you sign during your career. It's your 27 to 30-ish, maybe a few years on the end of that part of your career. That's where you tend to hit your peak. That's when a lot of players win championships. That's the decision that Donovan Mitchell has in front of him. So Darius is very important in that equation. But like, if the Cavs lose this series, if Darius doesn't show up tomorrow the way he has the last 2 games, honestly, it'd be great if he gave them a little bit more than he has in the last 2 games. There might be bigger picture questions on the table here, man. Like, it's been a really weird year for Darius, but even last year, the playoffs weren't super kind to him. And a repeat performance in a similar manner, like if he goes out sad tomorrow and they go out sad tomorrow, like, everything's on the table, man. Like, it's not just Donovan Mitchell could request a trade. It's not just JB Bickerstaff could get fired within the next 48 hours. Like, the Cavs have to take a serious look at the roster they've built across the board, because they went in thinking maybe it'll take some time, but we think we have a contending roster on our hands. And then you come out with 2 years without a playoff series win, particularly the way it's happened with all these guys underperforming. Darius Garland among them, like, his future comes into question at that point. So I'm watching Darius Garland. I know that's because he is probably the second most important player to at least their offensive success tomorrow, and he's a foundational piece that we're still. I feel sacrilege to say, because I think I love him as a player. I'm not really sure he fits the puzzle long term yet.
Look, I mean, I think there are a lot of answers to this question, right? I think Darius, it speaks for itself. I think Donovan is wondering, is that the right running mate for me long term? Like, here's the thing. If the Cavs lose this series against the Magic, how they lose matters, why they lose matters. But Donovan's going into an offseason where he has a decision to make. He has a lot of power. He can either sign a contract extension or he can choose not to. And if he chooses not to, that shifts the pressure on the decision makers of this organization, right? Because then they have to determine, are we going to play this thing out and possibly lose him, let him walk for nothing? Or are we going to try and cash in our chips and see if we can recoup some assets for him? Because he's basically telling us that he's not ready to commit to us long term because for whatever reason, he doesn't believe in the teammates around him enough to compete for a championship. He doesn't believe in the direction of the organization enough to compete for a championship. He doesn't believe in the coach enough to compete for a championship. Donovan Mitchell is at a point in his career where he believes that he is ready to compete for championships. Donovan is at a point in his career where he believes that he should be in the conversation as the next face of the NBA. We can sit here and we can debate that. We can sit here and we can talk about whether Donovan's correct in that assessment of himself, but he has that level of belief in himself, okay? So he's looking for a place that aligns with his ultimate goal. He's looking for a place that is ready to compete for the same things that he believes he's ready to compete for. And if Darius Garland is an essential no-show in Game 7, or he doesn't look ready for the stage, or he's not ready for the moment, then, if you're Donovan, you ask yourself a question of, is this the right running mate for me? Am I going to commit to a team that has already committed to him, right? And then you say the same thing about Evan Mobley. You say the same thing about these other guys, JB Bickerstaff as well. So I do think that all of that stuff is part of this equation. And you can talk about Evan Mobley. You can talk about Darius Garland. But these playoffs from the very beginning, whether it was fair or not, Donovan Mitchell chose to put the pressure on himself. He did. He wanted it. He knew that he was not good enough last year against the Knicks. And look, that was an organizational thing. There wasn't anybody that was very good in that series against the Knicks. And we've talked about that a number of times. But Donovan's the star, and he shouldered a lot of the blame for that loss against the Knicks. And then 2 years ago, in his last season in Utah, he got outplayed by Jalen Brunson and the Dallas Mavericks. So, Donovan came into these playoffs with a whole bunch to prove. No matter the circumstances, no matter the situation with his knee, if Donovan Mitchell cannot lead a Cavs team past the Orlando Magic in round 1 of the playoffs, that becomes a referendum on his ability to win in the playoffs. Whether it's fair or not, that is the expectation. There is a star standard in place. Look at what Anthony Edwards is doing. Just look what he's doing, right? That's what people outside are looking at Donovan Mitchell to do for his Cavs team.
And I definitely think that's part of taking the initiative and saying that this is my series. This is going to be my led series. If I can't do it, then I'm going to take the blame for it. And I definitely agree with you, Chris. Him taking the full-on extent of what happened last year and coming in this year and saying that he wants to be better, the Cavs are asking for him to be better. Everybody's asking for him to be better. And obviously, Game 6 was a taste of what he is capable of and what he has accomplished in playoffs before. But it's Game 7, and all chips are on the floor. And they need him to be at that level, no matter how bad his knee hurts or anything. And I think that's also part of it. In Game 6, he showed how much he wanted to win that game. Jimmy mentioned it yesterday. They thought that was the day that they could win it. They were going to go all out. And he was playing through pain. He was playing through everything, and it still wasn't enough. So my next question is, because I feel like we talk about the three-pointer being a weapon that the Cavs have used not enough in this playoff series, and they've seen success with it over the course of the season. Do you think that J.B. Bickerstaff needs to make adjustments? Are there different rotations that he can use that can be better suited for this Orlando Magic matchup that have not been used yet or have not been delved into enough? Like, do you think Sam Merrill should get longer extended minutes in Game 7 if they want to get more shots up? Chris, what do you think about all of that? Because I know we've talked about J.B. Bickerstaff at length on this podcast the last couple of days.
I think people are looking for a magic bullet. I think people are looking for an answer that does not exist. There are 4.5 play, if you include Jared Allen, if he's able to suit up for Game 7. There are 4.5 playable guys so far in this series.
Can we go to hundreds? Can it be 0.25 if we're talking about injured players?
And it doesn't mean like somebody who has been bad in the first 6 games can't show up in a Game 7, can't completely find it and just snap out of a funk. That could happen. Those things do happen in the history of the NBA, especially when it comes to Game 7. But, I mean, what is he supposed to do when Karis LeVert is giving absolutely nothing? And he was the team's 6th man, and he was the team's connector of the second unit. He was the team's anchor of the second unit. Like, what's he supposed to do when George Niang is a complete and utter liability at both ends of the floor? What's he supposed to do when Isaac Okoro has a wide open 3 with 5 minutes to go after great offense and he record scratches? What's he supposed to do when 2 games ago Isaac Okoro gets inserted in the starting lineup and he goes 2 for 10 from the field? And then he finds money with Marcus Morris Sr. coming off the bench in Game 5, and then in Game 6, it turned into a pumpkin. Like, Evan Mobley scored 3 points in Game 6. He was 1 of 5 from the field. So it's like, sure, there are things that a coach has to do. He's got to try everything. He's got to turn over every rock. He's got to make difficult decisions. He's got to ignore maybe some of the stuff that he leaned on throughout the course of the regular season and just go based on his feel of that game, based on his sense of the moment, and all that kind of stuff. He went away from Karis LeVert. Like, think about the importance of Karis LeVert to the Cavs throughout the entire season. JB was willing to make a decision to bench him in the second half because he just didn't like what he saw in the first half. And how could you? He airballed a free throw, basically. Like, he got his pocket picked in the backcourt. He was on a different planet. But, like, when you only have so many guys at this point that you can trust based on what you've seen through the first 6 games of this series in this matchup against this opponent, it becomes very, very difficult. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a case to be made to going to Sam Merrill. But, like, for all the people that are making that case, and I'd make the case too, because he provides gravity, he provides spacing, he provides shooting, theoretically. Understand that if you're going to make that case, very few players on the Cavs roster have looked ill-equipped for playoff basketball as Sam Merrill has during this series. Okay, and that's no knock on him. But, like, he's the 10th, 11th, 12th guy on a championship-level team, right? He's a specialist. He has a specific role, and he can play to that role. But in this series, he has looked completely out of place. So if you want to go to him, and you want to give him a short leash, and you want to see if he can get hot in a hurry and make a 3, ignite the crowd, give himself some confidence and his teammates some confidence, then that's fine. That's okay. But understand that he has been awful in this series, and he has looked completely out of place at both ends of the floor in this series. And I don't think enough people are admitting that to themselves because they just think Sam Merrill, shooting, spacing. I saw him do certain things in the regular season. Like, How many guys have played in this series? Like 19 combined for both teams. He's been like the second worst, right next to George Niang, if we're being perfectly honest. And like all of those people at the bottom of that list that I just brought up are Cavs, right? Karis LeVert is in that conversation, George Niang, Sam Merrill as well. So just like if you're going to make the Sam Merrill argument, cool, totally get it. The skill set would theoretically make sense, but just like understand what you've seen from him and what he has shown in the first 6 games when making that ask of somebody like JB Bickerstaff.
He made 3 threes through the first 6 games of the series.
And how many were in garbage time?
Exactly. And they came during the game where the Cavs got absolutely embarrassed.
Yeah.
Like, and here's the other thing. It happens. Chris mentioned it earlier. Unlikely Game 7 heroes come out of the woodwork. That's
Sure.
part of the beauty of some of these moments. That could happen for Sam Merrill or bench player X for the Cavs in this game. I don't know if I'm trying to bet on it, because when the pressure gets bigger, most guys don't get better. Particularly guys who have played, for the most part, 5 minutes at a time in this series. And I say that to say that as much as Cavs fans want JB Bickerstaff to make the buzzword adjustments, as much as he has been searching, trying different things throughout the series, like, when you get to this point, usually it actually ends up being you contract rather than expand the rotation. Usually what ends up happening is that however many guys you really trust to play in this situation, you just ride them until their legs can't take it anymore. Like, this is a situation, like LeBron used to, in games like this, like this is a 46-minute plus game for prime LeBron. 48 if he can stand it.
Right.
And the rest comes during TV timeouts, or like honestly, like if Donovan Mitchell's rolling and like JB doesn't feel comfortable taking him off the floor at a certain point in this game, if it's that close, like, maybe you use a challenge you wouldn't otherwise use early in the fourth quarter. I'm serious. Like, anything you can do to buy time for the guys that you do trust is imperative in moments like this, man. Like, we're like Chris mentioned, 4.5, 4 and however many decimal points you want to put. That's where we're at. That's where we're at with the rotation.
Yeah.
The answer is not sprinkle a little bit of fairy dust on Sam Merrill, or I got a Damian Jones email today, guys.
Oh no.
Like, that ain't it.
Yeah.
That ain't it.
I got like
Damian
3
Jones.
of those.
Damian Jones, great on paper. He's athletic.
Right.
There's a reason he ain't playing, guys. Even when the starting center goes out, it's not going to happen. You ain't going to see him. That's not what happens in these situations. And it shouldn't be. It should be pick your 5 or your 6, or if JP's feeling adventurous with the way this series has gone, your 7 or 8, and play them as much as you possibly can. Max Strus, get ready to run, buddy. You're playing a lot tomorrow.
Right, yeah.
You're playing a lot tomorrow. Evan Mobley, especially if Jared Allen isn't out there, like, we're going to test the limit of big man minutes. Like, I personally feel like Evan's been pushing 40 minutes the last 2 games. That is a lot for a big man. That is a lot, particularly for an Evan. We've seen the strides that he's making against this bigger, burlier front line and a defense that really tests you at the rim, really tests your endurance. But that's a lot, man. Big man minutes don't usually run that high. That is a lot, but we're going to see it tomorrow. Donovan Mitchell's on a bad knee. 45 plus, 42 plus, whatever. Darius Garland is, I mean, we haven't talked about the back in a few games. I don't know what's going on there. but he's slighter than most of the guys out there. 42 plus. That's what this is. It's not the answer is not something you haven't tried already. It's actually more of what's already working. And the Cavs have so few players that have it going and so few options in that regard that's what it's going to be. It's going to just be more of what you've already seen.
I also think we did have more of a conversation about the 3-point shooting, and I think every one of us would admit that that they need to take more threes. Donovan said it point blank in his press conference following the Game 6 loss. He said, we got to get closer to 40. I think they had 28 in Game 6. They're averaging around 31 threes in this series. That number can certainly be bumped up. But here's the thing. They are generating quality looks. The Magic are a very good defensive team. Very good. They're long everywhere. They're athletic. They're dogs on the defensive end of the floor. And they've basically said, look, we're going to stick on Max Strus. We're going to stick on Sam Merrill when he's out there. If that means we happen to give up the paint a little bit, if that means we give up driving lanes to Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, and they make acrobatic finishes at the rim through contact over the length of defenders, cool. But we're not leaving these guys on the perimeter because we know that the Cavs want to drive and kick. We know that when Darius breaks down the defender, gets into the teeth of the defense, gets into the paint, he's looking for spray outs. Donovan Mitchell, same thing. So we're going to hug up on these shooters. We're not going to leave these shooters, and we're going to try and make it very, very difficult for the Cavs to find enough other offense around Darius and Donovan. And we talked about that yesterday on the podcast. And that's a really good strategy. It's a smart strategy, and it certainly has some merits. But part of that strategy is working because the Cavs aren't making open shots. They aren't making the quality looks that they're getting. You know how many threes they've taken so far in this series, guys, total? The answer is 185. Okay. Of those, according to NBA.com, of the 185, according to NBA.com, 144 of those threes are classified as open or wide open. 144 of 185. You do the math. 41 contested threes in this entire series through 6 games. And yet the Cavs are shooting around 30% on those open or wide open threes. So they got to make shots. That's part of execution, right? That's part of adjustment. You got to make the shots that you get when they're quality looks. It's not easy to generate great offense against a great defense like the Magic. When you do, you better capitalize on those shots. And through the first 6 games, the Cavs certainly have not done that. I don't think that's a JB Bickerstaff problem. I don't necessarily believe that's a personnel problem. I don't necessarily believe that there's an adjustment that needs to make, some drastic adjustment that needs to be made. When you've got 144 open or wide open threes out of 185 total, what else are you supposed to do except for just make those shots?
So I think that kind of wraps up that question. And I wanted to kind of circle it around to the point that, can we all agree that there isn't a magical thing that they have not done that they could be doing that would change the outlook of this series? Or do you think there's 1 or 2 things that would drastically change this series or how this series is being looked at?
Well, the one thing that stands out to me going into Game 7, as harsh as this sounds, is not allow George Niang to see the court.
Yep.
I just thought his minutes in Game 6, guys, were too detrimental at both ends of the floor. He was getting bumped around on defense. He was committing silly fouls. He was getting blown by, and he certainly wasn't making shots. So I thought it was only 11 minutes for George, and I know that JB was searching, and I know that it becomes harder when you don't feel like you have a whole bunch of guys that you can trust. But I just think you have to avoid relatively long stretches of detrimental play from guys. And I just the evidence at this point through the first 6 games is that George should not be on the court in Game 7.
6 rebounds in 6 games. 5 games, because he didn't play one of them. Like, he's not making shots. If you want to say you're putting him out there to have side, I mean, look, maybe he's doing more on box outs than those numbers would tell you, but like, yeah, I'm with Chris on that. But again, for the most part, man, it's just these games are about found money. Like, by this point in the series, you kind of know what everyone's doing on the court. Like the Magic and Cavs, they know each other's play calls. They know each other's what, like in a really intense situation when you need a bucket. They know what the other team's trying to do. They know how that other team is trying to stop what they're trying to do in those situations. Man, it's about doing what you do better. It's about individual brilliance. Like Donovan Mitchell, I'm not saying he's going to give you 50, but like he's got to bring it. He's got to be somewhere between Game 1 and Game 6 Donovan Mitchell in this series. Darius Garland, it's not just that Darius Garland legacy or his future. Like, for the Cavs to win, Darius Garland's going to show up in a major way. Like, we talk about 3-point time. Darius Garland should be taking 3-pointers off the dribble. Like, you see a sliver of space, let it go. Let it go. Jared Allen, and if he plays, Evan Mobley, like, you guys have to be at your best protecting the rim. Like, this is, to answer your question, Ethan, no, there is no magic elixir.
Yeah.
It is real, like, it's, maybe that's boring to talk about at this juncture, but that's the reality. Like, these teams know each other so well at this point. It really is about who's going to get it done and who can Karis LeVert give you something off the bench? Anything? Can you play 2 halves? Can a coach trust you to play 2 halves? Can, like, a guy like Marcus Morris could be really important tomorrow and we don't know it. Role players play better at home, right? Marcus Morris scored 12 points, hit 2 of the biggest threes of the game in Game 5. Could play a huge role tomorrow. I bet you he's going to get some big minutes because he's one of a very small handful of guys that JB trusts right now, even though he didn't have a great shooting game in Game 6. Huge potential role. Max Strus. Heat culture, I know you're tired of talking about it, buddy, but like, this is kind of what you're here for. This is why we gave you 4 years, $64 million, is because we think you can meet the moment. And if you can't, there's no one behind you. So please do. That's basically what this is.
Yeah. And I think one of the last questions I want to ask for this podcast comes back to the big men, because we know the importance of Jared Allen. We know the importance of Evan Mobley. And if Jared Allen is able to go tomorrow, is going to be huge. And also, as Jimmy has mentioned in past podcasts, gonna be somebody to watch and how the Orlando Magic treat him on the offensive and defensive end and how physical they are. Chris, I know you might not have too much on this because everything's been going on rather quickly, but is there any update on Jared Allen that you might have, or how Evan Mobley was reacting after his ankle injury that had him out for a little bit in Game 6?
Evan's fine. Evan's not even listed on the injury report, guys. Evan has Wolverine blood, and yeah, he was limping around the locker room. He certainly was not as effective as he would have wanted to be, as the Cavs wanted him to be, especially after that ankle turn. in the second half, like, he just didn't have the same mobility. He didn't have the same explosiveness. There were times that guys on the Magic were trying to take him off the dribble, especially early in transition before the defense could get set, and he was just having a hard time like keeping up. So I do think it's something to monitor when it comes to his effectiveness, but he's not listed on the injury report. I fully expect him to try and give it a go, even though he was limited, especially on the offensive end, and he wasn't, the same in terms of his movement. He had 5 blocks. He was disruptive on the defensive end of the floor still. He can do those kinds of things. He can find a way still to make an impact, even though he's a bit hobbled. So I would have a hard time believing that he's going to be 100% for Game 7, but I don't know how many guys are 100% at this point in the season. And then Jarrett, it's the same thing that we talked about on the previous podcast, guys. Every time he has tried to test out what he needs to test out before the game, after practice, after shoot around, it's all about how effective can I be? How limiting would I be if I was out there on the court? How much can I protect myself? Can I move the way that I need to move for this team to be successful with me on the court? Can I do the things that are required, that are basically a prerequisite of being a big man in the series? He's having a hard time putting his arms above his head. And I was talking to another player on another team who had a similar injury to this. And he said one of the hardest things that he had to deal with when he had this injury, beyond the fact that he couldn't really get his wind and he couldn't take deep breaths because it hurt so bad, it was raising his arms up over, because of the stretching that is involved of that when it comes to the rib. I'm not a doctor. I don't know the severity of this rib injury. I don't know the things that you can or can't do with a bruised rib because I've never had one. At least I don't think I have. I've had 3 displaced ribs before, and that basically like couched me for a long time. But I've never had a bruised rib and tried to play a playoff basketball game, let alone a Game 7 against a pretty physical team. But I just think the things that he needs to do to be most effective for the Cavs, I find it hard to believe that he'll be able to do those at the same level. Put his arms up for rebounds, put his arms up to contest at the rim, set as many screens as he sets throughout the course of a game, and take all of the contact that's involved with screen setting, getting through screens, boxing out, all that kind of stuff. It just becomes pretty problematic with this kind of injury. And here's the other thing, guys. This is a rapid turnaround for the Cavs from Game 6 to Game 7, just like for the Magic. Playing a game in less than 48 hours after traveling back, right? Like, that kind of enters a different piece to this equation as well. There have been other games throughout the course of this series where it's been 2 days off, or it's been 3 days in between games. This is less than 48 hours. So it's a quick turnaround for Evan. It's a quick turnaround for Donovan. And it's a quick turnaround for Jarrett as well. And Jarrett wasn't ready in Game 6. Like, he tried to go through all the steps, and he talked to the trainers, and he went to the weight room in the trainer's room to just check his level of effectiveness, his level of movement, and all that kind of stuff. And the Cavs and Jarrett together determined that he wasn't ready to play Game 6. So if he wasn't ready for Game 6, I mean, it's just hard for me to see less than 48 hours that he's going to be healed enough to play and be the effective Jarrett that we saw in the first 4 games of the series, when he was arguably the Cavs' best player through the first 4 games.
I go back to possessions, like we talked about at the top, guys. Jared Allen dominated the glass the first 2 games of this series, which was the best the Cavs have looked since the postseason started. Whether he's not playing, whether he's limited, Chris's point about screens was really important. I mean, we're getting real in the minutia here, but like, screens are the easiest way to sneak in a little cheap shot to somebody because you're fighting through them anyways. It's just a passing, it's a nothing referees won't even notice it if someone throws you a little Charlie horse here or there on the screen. That Jared Allen, that's what he's there. I mean, he's a rim running big. That's what he does. He sets screens and goes to the rim. So that's really important. But again, in a game that we expect to be so low scoring, as I shake my laptop screen, that's how intense I'm feeling about this game. The rebounds matter that much more. The rim protection or the adjustments that you make Orlando make at the rim when they get there, if you're not blocking that shot, matter that much more. Especially given they just can't seem to make a shot on the road. Like they didn't shoot well in game 6 at home, but games 3 and 4 they shot about basically 40% from 3 in those 2 games, and they were still shooting less than 31% from 3 heading into game 6. Just tells you how much they've struggled on the road. So that, like, Orlando, this game will be decided basically in the restricted area, restricted area and the free throw line. You tell me who wins that area, I'd probably tell you who wins the game in this one, because Orlando wants to live there. The Cavs are compromised on their defense in that area, and if again, depending on where Jared's at, they're compromised in their ability to secure misses in that area. All these little small things, whether it's the inch, like Evan's ankle, even if he's not on the injury report, Jared Allen, even if he plays his ribs, Donovan Mitchell, no matter what he tells us, his knee is bothering him. All of these tiny nooks and crannies can add up to big holes in a one-game setting where your season is decided. And this stuff really worries me.
And I think that gets to the next series, which we will talk about in more depth later. But games, maybe
putting the cart before the horse here.
The cart has 2 broken wheels. Do you not understand that?
I mean, we cannot go into game 7 saying, well, Cavs are at home, they're going to win. Let's start talking about Boston.
You guys seen Jason Tatum recently?
So that's more so what I was talking about. I didn't want to get into actually talking about the next series, but I wanted
to. Haven't heard that one yet.
100%, definitely not. But all I was gonna say was Boston hasn't played a game since last Wednesday, and I'm just imagining obviously, like we've said, every team is going through something in the postseason in this part of the season. They just been sitting at the crib, resting, practicing, getting everything together. And the Cavs have to go through game 7, injured. Don't know exactly how much the Orlando Magic are going through, who they could go and play Boston depending on what happens in game 7. It just feels like, sure, you can point to the Boston Celtics could be rusty for the next series, but
everybody was trying to make that claim at the end of the regular season because Boston just wasn't taking it seriously, and they were giving big minutes to Peyton Pritchard and Luke Cornett and Sam Hauser and some of these guys, and people are like, oh my goodness, I don't know if they're going to be able to crank their intensity back up once the playoffs start. They're playing with fire. They're not taking the last few games of the regular season seriously. They might be out of rhythm. They might not be ready for playoff basketball. I don't know if this is the right approach. And then what happens? Game 1 against Miami, they win by 20. I just think Boston is so good that the only team in the Eastern Conference that can beat Boston is Boston.
And that is how we will wrap up today's podcast. Game 7 tomorrow, Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Orlando Magic face the Cleveland Cavaliers at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. Game 7, baby. The best 2 words in sports. But that will wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to subscribe to Subtext and join the Cavs community and become an insider to communicate with me, Chris, and Jimmy on a daily basis. Get all the insight that you might need during the game, before the game, injury report. I bet you, I have a good suspicion that Chris Fedor might have the intel on if Jared Allen's going to play before it hits the online world. And the first place you can find this information, Subtext. So to get it, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy. But we can tell you that the only place to get your voice heard is through Subtext. So, y'all be safe. We out.